She brought soup every day to an elderly man on the street. Suddenly, 4 attorneys knock on her door. Sarah Miller woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning to prepare homemade soup before leaving for work. At 28, she split her routine between cleaning a commercial building downtown and caring for Mrs. Martha, her 62-year-old mother who suffered from arthritis in her hands. But what truly gave her day meaning always happened at 7 o'clock sharp, when she walked 3 blocks to find Mr. Arthur. That's what she called him, though he had never revealed his real name. The elderly man with greying hair and a sparse beard was always sitting on the same corner, near the closed bank, wrapped in worn-out clothes that were once of good quality. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur," said Sarah on that Tuesday morning, kneeling beside him with the steaming thermos in her hands. "Young lady, you don't have to do this every day," murmured the man, but his eyes lit up when he caught the scent of the vegetable soup. "Of course I do. My mother always said that whoever has 1 plate of food has 2, one for themselves and another to share." Sarah served the soup in the small plastic container she carried in her bag and watched as he held the vessel with hands that trembled slightly. Despite his apparent fragility, there was something in his eyes that always intrigued her. They weren't the empty eyes of someone who had given up on life, but rather of someone carrying deep secrets. "Mr. Arthur, have you ever told me about your family?" she asked, sitting on the curb beside him. The old man stopped eating his soup for a moment and stared at the horizon as if searching for something he had lost long ago. "Family is a complicated thing, young lady. Sometimes you think you know people, but discover you were mistaken all along." "We all have our family problems," replied Sarah, adjusting the denim jacket she always wore. "My mother and I argue sometimes because she thinks I spend too much money helping others." "Your mother worries about you. That's different." There was a bitterness in his voice that Sarah had noticed before, but she never had the courage to investigate. She respected his silence about the past, just as he respected her need to help. For the next 3 months, this routine repeated religiously. Sarah discovered that Mr. Arthur knew a lot about literature and art, citing classic authors and making intelligent observations about the passers-by on the street. She began to bring some old books she found in the building where she worked, and was surprised by how easily he could discuss the works. "Did you study a lot when you were young?" she asked one Thursday morning as he leafed through a novel she had brought. "Studying is an understatement. I was surrounded by books and numbers all the time." "Did you work in a library?" Mr. Arthur smiled enigmatically and handed back the book. "Something like that, young lady. Something like that." Sarah noticed strange details. His clothes, though dirty and torn, were expensive brands. His shoes, even worn out, were genuine leather. And there were days when he seemed to have bathed, though she never knew where. One rainy Friday morning, Sarah arrived at the corner and didn't find Mr. Arthur. She waited for 15 minutes, pacing back and forth in the light rain, but he didn't appear. Worried, she decided to search the nearby streets. It was in a dark alley between 2 abandoned buildings that she found him. Mr. Arthur was lying on the wet ground, unconscious, with weak and irregular breathing. Sarah ran to him and felt that his skin was cold and clammy. "Help! Someone help me!" she shouted, but the street was empty at that hour. Without hesitation, she called emergency medical services using the payphone on the corner. When the ambulance arrived, she insisted on accompanying him to the hospital, lying that she was his niece, so she wouldn't be prevented from entering. At City General Hospital, the doctors explained that Mr. Arthur was having a severe diabetic crisis complicated by malnutrition. His body was fighting an infection that could have been prevented with basic medical care. "He needs to be hospitalized for at least a week," informed Dr. Rachel, a 40-year-old woman with a tired expression. "Do you have health insurance?" Sarah Miller swallowed hard. She could barely pay her own medical expenses, let alone someone else's. He has no family, just me, really." "I'll see what I can do to get him a bed through the public system," said the doctor, more gently. For the next 3 days, Sarah visited Mr. Arthur every afternoon after work. He remained somewhere between awake and unconscious, murmuring things she couldn't fully understand. Sometimes they were numbers, other times names that sounded familiar. Julian. The contracts. 15%, he murmured one afternoon. "Doctor, is this normal?" Sarah asked Nurse Emily, who was checking the medications. "It's common in cases of severe malnutrition. The brain gets confused. Sometimes people fantasize about money, power, things they wish they'd had in life." But Sarah noticed his delusions were very specific. He mentioned companies she knew by name, talked about meetings and corporate decisions with a precision that left her intrigued. On Thursday afternoon, when she arrived to visit him, the bed was empty. "He left this morning," explained Nurse Emily. "Said he felt better and had things to take care of. But he was still weak. How could you let him leave?" "He signed a release form. We can't force anyone to stay hospitalized against their will." Sarah left the hospital with a heavy heart. She ran to the corner where she usually found him, and there was Mr. Arthur, paler and more fragile than ever, but in his usual spot. "Mr. Arthur, you gave me a terrible fright," she said, almost shouting. "Sorry, girl, I didn't mean to worry you. Why did you leave the hospital? You still needed care." He avoided looking directly at her and fidgeted nervously with his hands. "The hospital is no place for people like me. People like you. People who don't deserve help." His answer left her confused and sad. Sarah sat down beside him and held his cold hand. "Everyone deserves help, Mr. Arthur. You taught me that." "I never taught you anything, girl. You were born with that good heart." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, Sarah noticed that Mr. Arthur was different. He ate less, spoke less, and seemed constantly looking over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "Are you afraid of something?" she asked on a Monday morning. "Everyone is afraid of something, girl." "But afraid of what?" He sighed deeply and looked at the cloudy sky. "That the past comes back to collect the debts we thought we'd forgotten." His cryptic answer increased Sarah's concern even more. She began to notice that Mr. Arthur wore different clothes every few days, always of good quality, but never the same ones. When she asked where they came from, he said he found them in donations, but she doubted it. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the office where she worked as a cleaner, Sarah saw a copy of Fortune Business Weekly open on Attorney Miller's desk. On the cover was a photo of a man in a suit, younger and well-groomed, but with eyes that made her stop everything she was doing. They were the same eyes as Mr. Arthur's. She picked up the magazine with trembling hands and read the headline. "The Mystery of Edward Sterling's Disappearance. Billionaire Vanishes After Corporate Scandal." The article talked about a 65-year-old businessman who disappeared 15 years ago, the day before he was to sign important documents for his company. Edward Sterling was the founder and majority shareholder of Sterling & Associates, one of the largest construction firms in the state. Sarah read every word with her heart pounding. The physical description matched, the age did too. But what convinced her the most was a smaller photo, where the businessman was in a library, surrounded by books, with the same thoughtful expression she saw on Mr. Arthur every day. "It can't be," she murmured, but deep in her heart, she knew it was. That night Sarah could barely sleep. Her mind was buzzing with questions and possibilities. If Mr. Arthur really was Edward Sterling, why was he living on the streets? What happened 15 years ago that made him abandon everything? The next morning she arrived at the corner with the soup as always, but also with the magazine folded in her bag. "Mr. Arthur, can I show you something?" she said, taking out the magazine. The elderly man looked at the publication and his expression changed completely. The blood drained from his face and his hands began to tremble more than usual. "Where did you get this?" "At the office where I work." "Mr. Arthur, this man looks a lot like you." He closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time. When he opened them again, there were tears. "That man no longer exists, girl." "But Edward Sterling was buried 15 years ago, along with everything he stood for. I'm just Arthur, an old man who found an angel in the form of a girl who brings soup every day." The indirect confirmation left Sarah even more confused. If he really was the missing businessman, that meant he was entitled to a fortune. Why then did he continue living on the streets? "What happened 15 years ago?" she asked softly. Arthur took a deep breath and looked at the street traffic. "I discovered that the people I trusted most were betraying me in the worst possible ways. I discovered that the money I thought I was using to build good things was being used to destroy others. And I discovered that—" He stopped, swallowing his words with difficulty. "I discovered that my own daughter was involved." "Your daughter?" "Claire, my only daughter. I thought she was the most honest person in the world, but I found out she was collaborating with Julian, my partner, to push me out of the company." The pieces began to fall into place in Sarah's mind. The hospital delusions had mentioned Julian and contracts. Edward Sterling had disappeared precisely when he was supposed to sign important papers. "And that's why you vanished?" "I ran away like a coward. I didn't have the courage to face the truth, so I chose to disappear and let them have everything." "But didn't you try to fight for your rights?" Arthur smiled bitterly. "Girl, when you discover your own family has betrayed you, what's the point in fighting for material things? What truly mattered was already lost." Sarah fell silent, absorbing the story. Suddenly she understood why he refused to accept medical help or improve his situation. Arthur was punishing himself for something that wasn't even entirely his fault. "Have you ever thought that maybe your daughter didn't know everything? That maybe she was deceived too? I saw the documents, girl. Her signature was on everything. Signatures can be forged. People can be manipulated." Arthur looked at her with an expression that mixed hope and skepticism. "After 15 years, what difference does it make?" "It makes all the difference in the world. You have your whole life ahead of you. What if your daughter has spent all these years looking for her father?" Before Arthur could answer, Sarah heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw 4 men in dark suits walking toward them. Something in their determined posture made her immediately alert. "Mr. Arthur," she whispered, "I think we'd better get out of here." But it was too late. The 4 men were already standing in front of them, and the tallest one, a man of about 50 with greying hair at his temples, addressed Arthur directly. "Mr. Edward Sterling, we need to talk." Arthur flinched, as if he'd been punched in the stomach, but he didn't deny the identity. "How did you find me?" "We have our methods," the man replied. "My name is Mr. Lawrence Harrison. I represent the firm Julian Sterling and Associates." Sarah noted that the firm's name now included Julian as the principal. She stood up and placed herself between Arthur and the lawyers. "What do you want with him?" "Miss, this doesn't concern you," said another younger lawyer with a condescending tone. "Everything that concerns Mr. Arthur concerns me too," she replied firmly. Mr. Harrison smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Interesting. Mr. Sterling, I see you've made friends. That could be useful for all of us." "Just say what you want," said Arthur, standing up with difficulty. "We want you to come back home. Your company needs your signature on some pending documents." "You mean Julian needs my signature?" "Mr. Julian is merely minding the business in your absence, but there are legal matters that require your presence." Arthur laughed ironically. "After 15 years, now you remember I exist?" "Circumstances have changed. There are ongoing lawsuits that could affect the company's assets. We need to regularize your legal status." Sarah sensed that something was wrong. If Arthur really was the owner of the company, why couldn't they just force him to return? Why were they being relatively polite? "And if I refuse?" asked Arthur. Mr. Harrison's smile became even less friendly. "That would be a shame, especially for people who care about you." The lawyer looked meaningfully at Sarah, and she felt a chill in her stomach. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all, miss. Just commenting that it would be sad if something happened to innocent people because of someone else's stubbornness." Arthur stepped closer to Sarah and held her arm. "Leave her out of this. If you want to talk to me, we'll talk, but away from her." "Perfect," said Mr. Harrison. "Our car is around the corner. We can settle everything today." "No!" exclaimed Sarah. "Mr. Arthur, don't go with them." "Kid, it's better this way. I've hidden for too long." "But—" Arthur turned to her and held her hands. "Thank you for everything you've done for me. You restored my faith in humanity." "That sounds like a goodbye, Mr. Arthur." "It is, kid." The lawyers moved closer, clearly impatient. "Let's go, Mr. Sterling. We have much to discuss." Sarah watched as Arthur was escorted by the four men to a luxurious black car. Her heart was racing, and she knew something was very wrong. She couldn't just let this happen. She ran home, grabbed all the savings she had kept in a jar in the kitchen, and went straight to the downtown area. She needed help, and she knew exactly where to get it. The Legal Aid Center operated in a small room on the third floor of an old building. Attorney Diane Bennett was a 55-year-old woman who had dedicated her life to defending people without resources. "Attorney Diane, I need your help," said Sarah, still breathless from running up the stairs. "Calm down, my dear. Tell me what happened." Sarah recounted the whole story, from the first day she met Arthur to the appearance of the lawyers. Diane listened carefully, making occasional notes. "Are you sure he really is Edward Sterling?" "I am. He didn't deny it when the lawyers called him by that name." "And you think he's in danger?" "I'm sure of it. There was something sinister about those men." Diane sighed and leaned back in her chair. "My dear, this is very complicated. If Edward Sterling really disappeared voluntarily 15 years ago, technically he isn't being kidnapped now. But they threatened to hurt me if he didn't cooperate. Do you have proof of that?" Sarah realized she had nothing concrete, just the sense of threat she had picked up from the conversation. "No, it was more of a way of speaking. Look, I can make some calls, try to find out more about this company, but in the meantime, you need to be very careful. If they really threatened you, it could be dangerous to get more involved." "But I can't just abandon your Arthur." Diane smiled affectionately. "I see you care a great deal for him. That's admirable, but it can also be dangerous. Give me some time to investigate and you stay home tonight, okay?" Sarah agreed reluctantly, but she actually had no intention of staying home doing nothing. When she left Attorney Diane's office, she had a plan in mind. She went back to the corner where she usually found Arthur and watched the activity. She knew the lawyers might return or that someone related to them might show up. Her intuition was right. After 2 hours of waiting, she saw the same black car park near the spot. This time, a woman of about 40 got out of the car, elegantly dressed, with well-kept blonde hair and a sad expression on her face. She looked around as if searching for someone specific. Sarah hid behind a newspaper stand and watched. The woman approached some people experiencing homelessness in the nearby square, showing a photo and asking questions. Her attitude seemed desperate, not threatening like the lawyers. After much hesitation, Sarah decided to approach. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I help you with something?" The woman turned and Sarah was struck by the resemblance of her eyes to Arthur's. "Do you know this man?" asked the woman, showing an old photo of Edward Sterling. "Yes, I do. Who's asking?" "My name is Claire Sterling," said the woman with tears in her eyes. "This man is my father." Sarah felt her heart race. This was the daughter Arthur accused of betraying him. "Your father disappeared many years ago." 15 years, Claire confirmed. 15 years I've looked for him every single day." "But he said you were involved in a betrayal against him." Claire looked visibly shocked. "A betrayal? What betrayal?" "With his partner, Julian. He said you conspired to push him out of the company." Claire began to cry more intensely. "My God, he really believes that? You weren't involved?" "Involved? I was only 25 at the time. I barely knew how the company worked. Julian was the one who handled everything when my father disappeared. He said he had powers of attorney signed by my father." Powers of attorney? Documents that gave him the authority to manage the business while my father was absent. Sarah realized there was much more to this story than Arthur imagined. "Claire, I need to tell you something. I know your father. He is alive and was fine until this morning." Claire nearly collapsed. Sarah held her arm to support her. "He's alive? Where is he?" "He was on the street living as a homeless person, but this morning some lawyers showed up and took him away." "What lawyers?" "They said they represented the firm Julian Sterling and Associates." Claire's face turned pale. "Julian, I knew he was plotting something." "What do you mean?" Claire looked around nervously. "We can't talk here. Come with me. I need to tell you the whole truth." They got into Claire's car, a simple sedan very different from the lawyer's luxurious vehicle. During the drive to a discreet cafe, Claire began to reveal her version of the facts. When my father disappeared, I was desperate. Julian said he had left a letter explaining that he needed to step away for personal reasons, and that he was entrusting the company to him. And you believed that? I was young and didn't understand business. Julian had been my father's partner for over 20 years. I trusted him completely. But later you discovered something. In the last 5 years, I started noticing irregularities, strange contracts, accounts that didn't add up, employees being fired for no apparent reason. Claire stopped the car in front of the cafe and turned to Sarah. Last week, I discovered my father never signed those powers of attorney. Julian forged his signature. How did you find out? I hired a handwriting expert to examine the documents. I have the proof here with me, she said, tapping her purse. That's why the lawyers showed up today. They know you found out. Exactly. And now they need my father alive to sign new documents. Otherwise, I'll be able to prove the forgery in court. Sarah felt a wave of panic. So your father really is in danger. Great danger. Julian can't let him tell the truth about what happened 15 years ago. What truth? Claire took a deep breath. My father didn't run away out of cowardice or because he felt betrayed by me. He discovered Julian was using the company to launder dirty money and exploit workers under illegal conditions. And why didn't he report it? Because Julian threatened to hurt me if he said anything. My father disappeared to protect me. The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Arthur had sacrificed himself for his daughter, and now he was paying a terrible price for it. We have to save him, said Sarah. I agree, but it won't be easy. Julian has a lot of power and many connections. So where do we start? Claire smiled for the first time since they'd met. You really care about him, don't you? Mr. Arthur, your father, taught me there is kindness in the world. I can't let them hurt him. Then let's be partners. But I have to warn you, this will be dangerous. I don't care. They entered the cafe, and Claire began to explain the plan she had been devising for weeks. First, I need to tell you more about Julian. He's not just corrupt, he's dangerous. Over the last 15 years, he's built an empire based on threats and blackmail. How did you find this out? I started investigating when former company employees began approaching me. They told horrible stories about degrading working conditions, delayed wages, covered-up accidents. Claire showed a folder with documents. I have testimonies, photos, records of irregular payments. Julian turned my father's company into an exploitation machine. And why haven't you taken this to the authorities? I tried, but Julian has friends in important positions. My lawyer told me I would need much more concrete evidence to get him arrested. What kind of evidence? Original financial records, recorded conversations, witnesses willing to speak publicly. Things only my father has access to. Sarah began to understand the scale of the problem. That's why they need him alive, but they also need him to cooperate. Exactly, and that gives us a window of opportunity. How so? Julian can't hurt my father before he gets the signatures he needs. That gives us time to come up with a plan. Claire pulled a city map from her bag. I found out where they're keeping my father. Housies, I have a contact inside the company, a secretary who's worked there for 20 years and remembers when my father was a good boss. She told me they saw my father entering an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Then let's go get him. It's not that simple. The place is being watched, and if we go in without a plan, we could make his situation worse. Claire drew circles on the map. We need a distraction to draw the guards away, and we also need evidence to prove what Julian is doing. What kind of distraction? I thought about reporting a violation at another company property, something that would force Julian to send his men there. And how do we get the evidence? My father must have kept important documents somewhere. If we can free him, he can tell us where they are. Sarah reflected on the plan. It seemed risky, but it was better than doing nothing. There's one thing that's bothering me, she said. What? How did the lawyers know where to find your father? He'd been in hiding for 15 years. Claire became thoughtful. You're right. Someone must have given them his location. Someone who knew his routine. Or someone who was being watched and led them to him. The two women looked at each other with the same terrible realization. "They were following me," said Sarah. "That's how they found him." "That means you're also in danger." "I don't care. I want to help your father." Claire reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand. "Then let's do this together. But first, you need to tell me everything about the last few months you spent with him. Any detail could be important." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah told her about the 3 months living with Arthur, the delusions at the hospital, the knowledge he demonstrated, the good quality clothes he occasionally appeared wearing. Did he mention numbers and names during the delusions? Yes. Julian, contracts, percentages. At the time I thought he was fantasizing. My father has an impressive memory for numbers. If he was delirious about specific contracts, it means he still remembers important details of Julian's scheme. Can that help us? A lot. If we can record him recounting those details, we'll have direct evidence. Claire looked at her watch. It's 4 in the afternoon. We have until tomorrow morning to execute the plan. Why until tomorrow? Because Friday is the day Julian always signs important contracts. If he gets my father's signature by then, it will be much harder to prove it was under duress. Then we have no time to waste. First, we need to prepare the distraction. Do you know anyone who can help us? Sarah thought of attorney Diane. I know a lawyer who can report violations to the proper authorities. Perfect. Call her and ask her to file an anonymous complaint about irregular working conditions at the new mall construction on the north side. Why that location? Because that's where Julian has the most employees working illegally. If they receive a complaint, they'll have to send supervisors there immediately. Sarah called Diane and explained the situation without going into too much detail. Diane agreed to file the report but warned again about the dangers of getting involved with dangerous people. The report will be filed in an hour, Sarah informed. Great. Now we need to prepare to go to the warehouse. Claire opened her purse and showed a small digital recorder. We'll use this to record everything my father says. It will be our main evidence. And if they discover it? That's why you'll keep watch while I go in. No. We go together or we don't go, Claire smiled. You're brave. My father was lucky to find you. He found me. I was just delivering soup, but he taught me about dignity and kindness. My father was always like that. Even when I was a child and he worked a lot, he always made time to teach me about values. Why did you grow apart? It wasn't by choice. When he disappeared, Julian convinced me that my father had abandoned the family under business pressure. I spent years angry at him. And when did you discover the truth? Gradually, as I matured and understood better how the business worked. But when I finally understood I had been deceived, I no longer knew how to find him. He'll be very happy to know you looked for him all these years. I hope so. I hope he can forgive me for believing Julian's lies. At 6 in the evening, they were parked 2 blocks from the abandoned warehouse. The place was in a decaying industrial district, with many empty sheds and little car traffic. There, Claire pointed. It's that grey building with the windows boarded up. Sarah saw 2 men standing at the main entrance, clearly on guard. How do we get in without them seeing? There's a side entrance that leads to the basement. My contact told me it's unlocked. What if it's a trap? It's a risk we have to take. They waited until it got a little darker. At 7:30, Claire received a message on her phone. The report worked. My contacts confirmed Julian sent half his men to the mall construction site. Does that mean fewer people are left here? Exactly. It's our chance. They got out of the car and walked carefully through the shadows, using the cover of the other abandoned buildings. The side entrance was indeed unlocked, protected only by a chain that had been recently cut. Someone came through here recently, Sarah whispered. It might have been my contact, making it easier for us to enter. They descended a concrete staircase leading to the basement. The place was dark and smelled of mold and dampness. Claire used her phone's flashlight to light the way. At the end of the corridor, they found a heavy metal door. Claire pressed her ear to it and heard voices on the other side. My father is in there, she whispered. How many people? At least 2 besides him. Claire turned on the recorder and handed it to Sarah. Stay here and record. If anything goes wrong, run and give this to the authorities. I won't let you go in alone. Sarah, if something happens to me, my father will have no one else to help him. Then don't let anything happen to you. Claire took a deep breath and slowly opened the door. The metal creak echoed down the corridor, and they froze, waiting for a reaction. There was none. The room was larger than they expected, poorly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Arthur was sitting in a chair in the center, with his hands tied behind his back. 2 men in suits were talking near the opposite wall, their backs to the door. Claire signaled for Sarah to stay by the door and silently approached her father. When Arthur saw her, his eyes filled with tears. "Claire," he whispered, "how did you find me?" "Daddy, we're here to get you out," she replied softly, starting to untie the ropes. "You shouldn't be here. It's dangerous." "I know everything, Dad. I know you disappeared to protect me. I know Julian forged your signature." "Did Julian tell you?" "I found out on my own, Daddy. Can you forgive me for believing him all these years?" Arthur tried to hug his daughter, even with his hands still partially tied. "I'm the one who needs your forgiveness, my child. I abandoned you when you needed me most." "You can make peace later," Sarah whispered from the doorway. "One of them is turning around." Indeed, one of the guards had noticed the movement and was walking toward them. Claire managed to completely untie Arthur's ropes at the last second. "Stop right there," shouted the guard. "Run!" yelled Arthur, pushing Claire toward the door. The second guard pulled out a cell phone, clearly to warn Julian. Arthur, weak as he was, threw himself against the man, knocking the phone to the floor. "Daddy!" screamed Claire. "Go! Take the evidence and go!" "What evidence?" asked the first guard, already getting close. "The evidence that proves all of Julian's crimes," replied Arthur defiantly. Sarah realized Arthur was buying time for them to escape, but she wasn't willing to leave him behind. "Mr. Arthur, let's all go together." "Girl, you don't understand. Julian is on his way here. If he finds you here—" "Julian is already here," said a cold voice from the entrance. Everyone turned and saw Julian Sterling standing in the doorway, blocking the only exit. He was a tall man, about 60 years old, with impeccably groomed grey hair and a suit that likely cost more than Sarah's annual salary. "Edward, my old friend," said Julian, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a lovely family reunion." "Julian," replied Arthur, placing himself between his former partner and the 2 women. 15 years, Edward. 15 years I've run your company, cared for your daughter, kept your legacy alive, and you thank me by escaping and now trying to sabotage me." "Legacy," laughed Arthur bitterly. "What legacy? You turned everything we built into a machine of exploitation. I turned a mediocre company into a billion-dollar empire, based on suffering and illegality." Julian moved closer, and his 2 guards positioned themselves to block any attempt to flee. "Claire, my dear," said Julian, addressing Arthur's daughter, "you've always been like a daughter to me. Why are you doing this?" "Because I found out who you really are," replied Claire, her voice trembling but firm. "And what do you think you've discovered? That you forged my father's signature, that you exploit workers, that you threatened my family." Julian sighed theatrically. "My dear, you're confused. Your father signed all those documents voluntarily before he abandoned you." "That's a lie." "Claire," Arthur interjected, "he's lying. I never signed those papers." "Of course you did, Edward. You signed because you knew you were losing your mental faculties and needed someone to take care of the business." "Mental faculties?" asked Sarah, speaking for the first time. Julian looked at her as if she were an irritating insect. "And who are you, dear?" "Someone who knows your Arthur better than you think." "Arthur," Julian laughed. "Ah, so that's how he introduced himself to you. Poor Edward. He doesn't even remember his own name anymore. He remembers everything, including all your crimes." "What crimes? Running a company efficiently?" Arthur stepped closer to Julian. "Efficient? You call it efficient to use substandard construction materials? To pay below the legal minimum wage? To force employees to work in dangerous conditions? I call that market competitiveness. And the accidents you covered up? And the workers who got hurt because you skimped on safety equipment? Accidents happen at any construction company. Not at this frequency. Not when the boss genuinely cares about his employees. Julian lost his patience. Enough! Edward, you will sign the papers I brought, or your two friends here will have trouble. What papers? Asked Claire. Documents that officially transfer the company's ownership to me. After all, after 15 years of running everything, it's only fair that I be recognized as the true owner. This is theft, exclaimed Sarah. This is legality, my dear. Edward will sign of his own free will. And if I refuse? Asked Arthur. Julian signaled to his guards, and they moved closer to Claire and Sarah. You won't refuse, not when the lives of the people you care about are at risk. Arthur clenched his fists but knew he was outnumbered. You've always been a coward, Julian, never had the courage to face the consequences of your own actions. And you've always been a naive idealist. That's why our partnership never really worked. It worked when we were honest. Honest? Edward, have you really forgotten why we started the company together? Arthur hesitated for a moment. To build quality homes for working families. To make money, to have power, to build an empire. No, Julian, for me it was never about the money. Liar! You loved the luxury, the trips, the expensive cars. Arthur looked at his own worn-out clothes. And look where that got me. The last 15 years have taught me that I don't need any of that to be happy. Julian followed his gaze. Happy. You call living on the street being happy. Happier than living knowing my wealth comes from the suffering of other people. How dramatic. Edward, you were always too emotional for business. Claire interrupted the argument. Julian, even if my father signs your papers, I will keep fighting you. No, my dear, you won't. Why not? Because you will also sign some documents. Julian gave another signal, and a third man entered the room carrying a briefcase. Documents stating that you agree to the transfer of ownership and that you renounce any future rights to the family assets. I will never sign that. Yes, you will, for the same reasons your father will sign his. Julian pointed at Sarah. This young woman has a sick mother, doesn't she? It would be terrible if something happened to Mrs. Martha during one of her trips to the hospital. Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew about her mother. How do you know about my mother? We know everything about you, my dear, including where she goes for physical therapy every Tuesday and Thursday. Arthur revolted. Julian, her mother has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with it. You made her part of the equation when you decided to team up against me. Leave her family out of this. Edward, are you giving me orders? After 15 years of being gone? I'm begging you, as someone who was once your friend. Julian laughed coldly. Friend? Edward? We were never friends. We were always just business partners. And you never understood that. I understood that perfectly. That's why I wanted out of the partnership. You wanted out because you discovered I was doing the dirty work you didn't have the guts to do. Dirty work? Someone had to make the tough decisions. Someone had to make the necessary sacrifices for the company to grow. Sacrifices? Julian, you were killing people with your decisions. Claire interrupted again. Killing people? What are you talking about? Arthur looked at his daughter with an expression of deep regret. Claire, there are things about the company you never knew. What things? The last project we developed before I disappeared was a housing complex for low-income families. Julian wanted to use cheaper materials than I authorized. And? 2 months after I left, one of the buildings collapsed. Claire brought her hand to her mouth, horrified. How many people? 15 families lost everything. 3 children were seriously injured. Julian interrupted impatiently. It was an accident. These things happen. It was no accident, shouted Arthur. You knew those materials weren't suitable. I knew we needed to be competitive in the market, at the cost of people's safety. Edward, you're being melodramatic. The building was rebuilt. The families were relocated. End of story. The children who were hurt, how are they? That's no longer our problem. Arthur turned to Claire. Now do you understand why I couldn't stay with the company? Why I needed to disappear? Why didn't you report him? Because he threatened you. Said if I said anything, you would suffer the consequences. Claire looked at Julian with pure hatred. You threatened a 25-year-old girl. I protected the company's interests. You protected your own interests. And I continue to protect them. That's why you're going to sign the documents right now. Julian signaled for the guards to bring the papers. Arthur and Claire were forced to sit at an improvised table, while Sarah was kept under watch. Edward, sign here, said Julian, pointing to a line on the document. And if I refuse? Julian nodded to one of the guards, who approached Sarah and gripped her arm tightly. Don't refuse? Arthur picked up the pen with trembling hands. He looked at Claire, then at Sarah, and closed his eyes. Daddy, don't sign, said Claire. We'll find another way to resolve this. There is no other way, daughter. Yes, there is. I have evidence against him. What evidence? Asked Julian, interested. Claire looked at Sarah, who discreetly showed the recorder still working in her pocket. Enough evidence to prove you falsified documents and exploited workers. Even if you have something, you'll never be able to prove anything in court. Why not? Because you and your father will disappear before you reach the courtroom. The direct threat made the atmosphere in the room even tenser. Arthur dropped the pen and stood up. Julian, this has gone too far. Sit down and sign the papers. No. Edward, I won't sign. Do what you want with me, but I won't legalize your theft. Are you sure? Julian gave another signal, and the guard squeezed Sarah's arm tighter, making her cry out in pain. Stop! Shouted Arthur. All right, I'll sign. No, Mr. Arthur, protested Sarah. Don't sign because of me. Young lady, I can't let you get hurt because of my problems. This isn't just your problem. It's the problem of all the exploited workers, of all the families who suffered from the accidents. Arthur hesitated again. Sarah is right, said Claire. Daddy, if you sign these papers, Julian will never pay for what he did. And if I don't sign, you two will suffer the consequences. At least we'll suffer fighting for a just cause. Julian was losing his patience. Enough family drama. Edward, you have 30 seconds to sign, or I'll have my men resolve this another way. What other way? Do you really want to find out? Suddenly they heard sirens approaching from outside. Julian was alarmed. What is that? One of the guards looked out the window. Official cars. Lots of official cars. How did they find us? Claire smiled. Because I didn't come here unprepared. What did you do? Before coming here, I recorded a video telling the whole story and scheduled it to be sent automatically to the authorities if I didn't cancel the send by 9 o'clock tonight. What time is it? Julian looked at his watch and saw it was 9:15. You betrayed me. I stopped you from continuing to harm innocent people. Edward, did you know about this? No, replied Arthur, looking at his daughter with pride. But I should have imagined. Claire has always been smarter than her father. The sounds outside grew louder, with voices giving orders and doors slamming. We'd better surrender, said Arthur. Never, replied Julian. He pulled a gun from his waist, surprising everyone. Sarah had never seen a real gun in her life, and fear paralyzed her. Julian, put that away, pleaded Arthur. It's already all lost. It's not lost as long as I have you as hostages. Hostages won't solve your problem. They'll give me time to negotiate a way out. Suddenly a strong voice echoed from outside through a loudspeaker. Attention! This location is surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Julian pointed the gun at Arthur. You're going to go out there and say everything is fine. I won't lie for you anymore, Julian. Then your daughter will do it. He pointed the gun at Claire. Leave my daughter out of this. Edward, you're going to do exactly as I say, or Claire will pay the price. Sarah realized the recorder was still running and capturing the entire conversation. Even if they didn't leave there alive, at least there would be evidence of Julian's crimes. Julian, she said, trying to buy time, do you really think you'll get away with this? Shut up. They already know everything. Even if you hurt us, it won't do any good. It will do good for me. Arthur noticed Julian was losing control and tried to approach slowly. Julian, let's talk calmly. We can still resolve this without anyone getting hurt. Don't come closer. We've been friends for over 20 years. Are you really going to hurt me? You forced me into this. You're the one who disappeared and left me alone with all the responsibility. You made your own choices, Julian. I made the choices you didn't have the courage to make. The right choices never require courage to hurt innocence. The loudspeaker voice returned. You have 5 minutes to come out peacefully. After that, we will enter by force. Julian was visibly desperate now. Edward, you're going to go out there and say you want to negotiate. You'll ask them to back off. And then we'll find a way to get out of here. There is no way out, Julian. You'd better surrender while you can still negotiate a lesser sentence. A lesser sentence? You think I'm going to prison? You've committed several crimes. It's inevitable. Julian laughed bitterly. Edward, you've always been naive. Men like me don't go to prison. Men like you. Men with connections, men with power. Men with enough money to buy freedom. Dirty money earned at the expense of others' suffering. Money is money, Edward. Its origin doesn't matter when you need to use it. Claire interrupted. Julian, even if you manage to escape today, you'll never have peace again. You'll always be looking over your shoulder. I prefer that to spending the rest of my life in jail. And what are you going to do with us? Keep us as hostages forever? I'll do whatever is necessary. Arthur took another step toward Julian. Whatever is necessary includes hurting my daughter? If it has to. Julian, I've known you for 20 years. I know you have a family too. Can you imagine someone threatening your children? My children are safe in a distant country, with new identities and full bank accounts. You planned this a long time ago. I always knew that one day I might need to disappear. Like I did. The difference is, I planned it properly. You ran away like a coward. I ran away to protect my daughter. You're running away to protect only yourself. So what? The simple question revealed everything about Julian's character. Arthur realized there was no humanity left in his former partner. Julian, what happened to you? Where is the man who once wanted to build houses for poor families? That man died when he discovered kindness doesn't pay the bills. Of course it does. You're the one who chose bigger bills. And you chose to live on the street eating soup from a stranger. And I was happier in those 3 months than in 20 years of partnership with you. The sirens outside grew louder, and they heard footsteps approaching. Final warning, shouted the voice from the loudspeaker. Come out now or we will enter by force. Julian was sweating and trembling. He looked at the 3 guards, who seemed equally nervous. Are you still with me? He asked. The guards exchanged glances. The oldest one replied, Mr. Julian, I think it's better if we surrender. What do you mean? We have no way to escape from here, and if anyone gets hurt, we'll be charged with much worse things. You're paid to obey me. We're paid to work, not to go to prison. One of the guards placed his gun on the floor and raised his hands. I surrender. The other 2 guards followed suit. Julian found himself alone and surrounded. Traitors! All of you! Julian, said Arthur calmly, it's over. Hand over the gun. Never. Are you going to shoot me, the man who was your partner for 20 years? If I have to. And then, will you shoot my daughter too, and Sarah? If I have to, repeated Julian, but his voice was less firm. At that moment they heard noises at the door. The rescue team was arriving. Last chance, Julian, said Arthur. Julian looked at the door, then at the 3 people in front of him, then at the gun in his hand. For a moment, he seemed to consider his options. Then suddenly he lowered the gun and sat down heavily in a chair. It's over, he murmured. It's really over. The door opened, and officers entered the room with weapons drawn. When they saw the situation was under control, they lowered their guns. Is everyone all right? Asked the commanding officer. We are, replied Claire. Who is Julian Sterling? The defeated man slowly raised his hand. I am. You are under arrest for kidnapping, threats, document forgery, and several other crimes that will be formally specified. As Julian was handcuffed, Arthur approached his daughter and hugged her for the first time in 15 years. Daughter, forgive me for disappearing. Dad, forgive me for believing him. There's nothing to forgive. You were too young to understand what was happening. Sarah watched the reunion with tears in her eyes. Then she approached Arthur. Mr. Edward, are you all right? Thanks to you, girl. If it weren't for you, I'd still be living on the street thinking my daughter hated me. And if it weren't for you, I would never have learned that kindness truly exists in the world. Claire joined the hug. Sarah, I don't know how to thank you for everything you did for my father. He did much more for me than I did for him. The commanding officer approached. Ladies, we will need your statements. And Mr. Edward, you also need to formalize the charges against Mr. Julian. Of course, replied Edward. I have 15 years of information to share. And I have this recording, said Sarah, showing the small device. It has his entire confession about the crimes. Perfect. With this evidence, it will be easy to ensure he is properly convicted. In the following weeks, the story of the businessman who lived on the street for 15 years to protect his daughter gained prominence in the local press. Edward Sterling became a symbol of integrity and paternal sacrifice. Julian Sterling was sentenced to 25 years in prison for multiple crimes, including forgery, labor exploitation, negligence resulting in workplace accidents, and kidnapping. The company was completely restructured under new management. Edward regained control, but now in partnership with Claire, who had learned much about business during the years Julian ran the company. Their first decision was to properly compensate all the families who had been harmed by Julian's irregular practices. They also implemented new safety protocols and employee wellness programs. Sarah Miller received an offer to work at the company as a social responsibility coordinator. Initially hesitant, afraid of losing her simple essence, but Edward convinced her that he needed people with solid values to ensure the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. "Young lady," said Edward in a conversation a few months later, "you saved not only my life, but also my soul. You brought me back to my daughter and taught me that there is still kindness in the world. Mr. Edward, you're the one who taught me about kindness. I just brought soup. You brought much more than soup. You brought hope, dignity, and unconditional love." Claire, who was present in the conversation, added, "Sarah, you gave us back our family. I don't know how we can repay that." "You don't need to repay anything. Continuing to be good people is repayment enough." Edward smiled. "How about we continue bringing soup to those in need, but now in an organized way through a structured company program?" "That would be amazing," replied Sarah. And so the Hearty Soup Initiative was born, serving dozens of homeless people every day, offering not only food but also medical assistance, job opportunities, and psychological support. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 6 months after the rescue, Edward and Claire had completely transformed the company. What was once a business focused only on profit became a benchmark for social responsibility and ethical labor practices. Mrs. Martha, Sarah's mother, was hired as a consultant for the elderly assistance program the company developed. Her personal experience with arthritis helped create more humanized care protocols for people with similar problems. "Daughter," said Mrs. Martha to Sarah one afternoon, "I never thought my arthritis could be used to help other people. Mother, everything in our life can be used for good, even our sufferings. Did you learn that from that man on the street?" "I learned it from life, Mother. Mr. Arthur only helped me understand it better." The relationship between Edward and Claire grew stronger every day. They worked together at the company, but also spent time recovering the 15 lost years. Edward talked about his experiences living on the street, and Claire spoke about what it had been like growing up believing her father had abandoned her. "You know what hurt me the most all these years," said Claire during a conversation in the office. "What?" asked Edward. "Thinking that you had given up on me, that I wasn't important enough for you to fight for." "Daughter, I fought in the only way I knew how. I disappeared to protect you. I know that now, but for a long time I thought it was because I wasn't a good enough daughter." Edward held his daughter's hand. "Claire, you were always the most important thing in my life. Everything I did was thinking about protecting you. And everything I did in recent years was trying to find you. Even without knowing it, we were both fighting for each other. The company not only recovered financially but reached profitability levels it had never achieved before. The difference was that now success came from ethical practices, motivated employees, and a solid reputation in the market. "It's interesting," commented Claire at a board meeting, "how doing the right thing ended up being more profitable too." "That's no coincidence," replied Edward. "Well-treated employees work better. Clients trust honest companies more. Suppliers prefer doing business with those who pay on time and treat everyone with respect." Julian never understood that. Julian was obsessed with short-term profits. He never thought about the long term. And look where that led him. Edward became thoughtful. "Sometimes I feel sad for Julian. He could have been my partner in a prosperous and ethical company. Instead, he chose the path that led to prison." "Dad, you can't blame yourself for his choices." "I don't blame myself. I just regret that things could have been different." Sarah, who was participating in the meeting as the social responsibility coordinator, added, "Mr. Edward, the important thing is that now we can make a difference in many people's lives. The past can't be changed, but the future is still in our hands." "You're right, my dear. And what a future we're building." Indeed, the company had become a model for other organizations. They received frequent visits from business people who wanted to learn about their social responsibility practices. The Hearty Soup initiative had grown tremendously. Beyond daily meals, they offered professional training courses, free medical care, psychological support, and even a temporary housing program for people reintegrating into society. "Remember when I only brought one thermos of soup?" asked Sarah of Edward one morning, as they observed the activity at the social assistance center they had built. "I remember it like it was yesterday," he replied. "A brave girl who knelt on the curb to care for a neglected old man." "You were never neglected, sir. You always had dignity." "You're the one who gave me back my dignity, my dear." "No, Mr. Edward. You never lost your dignity. I just helped you remember it existed." They stood watching the people being helped at the center. There were whole families receiving career guidance, elderly people getting free medical checkups, children playing in the recreational area while their parents attended courses. "You know what makes me proudest in all of this," said Edward. "What?" "That it started with a simple act of kindness, you bringing soup to a stranger, and look what it became. Do you think we've really managed to make a difference?" "I'm certain. Every person who comes through here takes a little hope back into their life. And some of them will pass that hope on to others." "Exactly. That's how we change the world, my dear. One person at a time." Claire approached them carrying a report. "Dad, Sarah, you need to see these numbers." "What numbers?" asked Edward. "The social reintegration rates from our program. 85% of the people who complete our courses secure stable employment within 6 months. "That's incredible," exclaimed Sarah. "And there's more," continued Claire. 15 companies in the region have offered to create specific positions for people from our program. Other business people are following our example." "Yes, Dad. We're creating a movement much bigger than we imagined." Edward felt tears of pride in his eyes. "Claire, you've become an amazing leader." "I learned from the best teacher." "No, daughter. You learned from circumstances and knew how to turn pain into strength." Sarah smiled, watching the interaction between father and daughter. "It's beautiful to see you two working together." "Sarah," said Claire, "none of this would be possible without you. You were the bridge that reconnected us. You reconnected because the love between you never died. I just helped you remember that. And we are eternally grateful for that." That afternoon, the three went to visit some of the social projects they had developed in the community. The first was a daycare center for employees' children and people from the area. "Remember when we talked about creating opportunities for working families?" asked Claire. "I remember," replied Edward. "It was one of the dreams Julian and I had when we started the company. Now we are making that dream come true, but the right way. The daycare served 50 children from 6 months to 5 years old. The facilities were modern, with educational toys, a green area, and teachers specialized in early childhood education." "Good afternoon, Mr. Edward," shouted some children when they saw him arrive. "Hi, everyone. How are you?" "We're good. Aunt Sarah brought us new books." Edward looked at Sarah. "You brought books?" "It's part of the Reading Encouragement Program. Every week we bring new books and read stories to the children." "And they love it," added the teacher in charge. "The children always ask when Aunt Sarah is coming back." They spent an hour playing with the children and hearing about their educational progress. Edward was particularly moved when a 4-year-old girl showed a drawing she had made. "This is Uncle Edward," said the girl, showing a drawing of a smiling man surrounded by many people. "Why did you draw me like this?" he asked, crouching to her level. "Because you make everyone happy." "I'm the one who gets happy when I see you." After leaving the daycare, they went to visit the housing project they had developed for company employees. They were simple but well-built houses, with all the necessary infrastructure for a decent life. "What a difference from those developments we used to build," commented Edward. "What was the difference?" asked Sarah. "Before we only thought about profit and construction speed. Now we think about the quality of life for the people who will live in the houses. And the costs. They are higher, it's true, but the return in employee satisfaction and company reputation more than makes up for it." They stopped in front of the house of Thomas, a worker who had been with the company for 8 years. "Mr. Edward," shouted Thomas, coming to greet them at the gate, "what an honor to have you here." "Thomas, how is the family?" "Very well, thanks to you. My children now have their own room to study in. My wife has a kitchen where the whole family can fit for dinner. That makes me very happy." "Mr. Edward, I wanted to tell you something," said Thomas, becoming more serious. "Go ahead. In Mr. Julian's time, we worked in fear. Fear of accidents, fear of being fired, fear of not getting paid on time. And now? Now we work with pride. Pride in being part of a company that cares about people. Thomas, you are the heart of the company. Without you, none of this would be possible. You always say that, but it's the first time in my life I've worked for someone who really believes it." Claire, who had remained quiet during the conversation, asked, "Thomas, do your colleagues feel the same way?" "Mrs. Claire, I can say without fear, all the employees respect and admire you and Mr. Edward. We know you truly care. And does that make a difference at work? All the difference in the world. When you work for someone who values you, you give your best." After leaving Thomas's house, the three walked in silence for a few minutes, absorbing the impact of the conversation. "Dad," said Claire finally, "I think I now completely understand why you disappeared 15 years ago." "How so?" "You couldn't live with the idea of exploiting people like Thomas." "Exactly, and now I see it was possible to do things differently from the start. But maybe it was necessary to go through all of that to learn the lessons we learned," said Sarah. "You think so?" "I think so. If things had been easy from the beginning, perhaps we would never have developed the compassion and wisdom we have today." Edward reflected on her words. "You may be right, my dear. The 15 years on the street taught me a lot about humility and empathy. And it taught me about determination and courage," added Claire. "And it taught me that small acts of kindness can change the world," concluded Sarah. At that moment, Claire's phone rang. It was from the company with important news. "We just received an official invitation," she said after hanging up. "What kind of invitation?" asked Edward. "The Ethical Business Association wants our company to be the first to receive the Corporate Integrity Excellence Award." "That's fantastic," exclaimed Sarah. "But the most important thing isn't the recognition," said Edward. "It's knowing we are truly making a difference." "And that we will continue to do so," added Claire. They returned to the company in the late afternoon. On the way, they passed the corner where Sarah used to meet Edward every morning. They stopped the car and walked to the spot. "It's strange to be here again," said Edward. "Why?" asked Sarah. "Because it feels like a completely different life, as if it were another person who lived here." "It was another person, Mr. Edward. You were Arthur, a wounded and lost man. Now you are Edward, a man who found his family and his purpose. And you, my dear, have you changed too?" Sarah smiled. "I was a cleaner who brought soup out of kindness. Now I'm a coordinator who brings hope as a profession." "All changes for the better," said Claire. "Because they were all motivated by love," replied Edward. They stood for a few minutes watching the street activity. It was the time when people were leaving work, rushing to return to their homes and families. "You know what makes me happiest about all of this?" asked Edward. "What?" asked Sarah and Claire together. "It's knowing that among all these people passing by here, some are going to homes built by our company with quality materials. Others work at companies that follow our example of social responsibility, and others are still being helped by our social programs. We are truly changing the community," said Claire. "One person at a time," added Sarah. That evening, Edward dined at Sarah's house for the first time. Mrs. Martha prepared a special soup for the occasion, using the recipe Sarah used to bring to him on the street. "Mrs. Martha," said Edward, "this soup isn't just delicious, it saved my life." "How so, Mr. Edward?" "Your daughter brought me this soup every day for 3 months, but more important than the food, she brought me dignity and hope. Sarah has always been like that. Since she was little, she can't see suffering without wanting to help. It was her kindness that changed my life and my daughter's life." Claire, who was also present at the dinner, added, "Mrs. Martha, your daughter didn't just save my father, she saved our entire family." "That makes me very proud," said Mrs. Martha, with tears in her eyes. "And it should," replied Edward. "You raised an extraordinary daughter. Actually, I think she raised herself. I always worked a lot and couldn't always give her the attention she deserved." "Mum," interrupted Sarah, "you taught me everything that is important." "He taught me to work honestly, to help others, and to never give up on my dreams." "And now your dreams have come true," said Edward. "Actually, my dreams have expanded," replied Sarah. "Before, I dreamed of having a stable life and being able to take care of my mother. Now I dream of helping hundreds of families have a better life." "And we will make that dream come true," said Claire. After dinner, they sat in the small, simple living room of Sarah's house. Edward looked around, seeing the family photos, the old but well-kept furniture, the plants that Mrs. Martha cultivated on the windowsill. "Do you know what impresses me most about this house?" he said. "What?" asked Sarah. "The happiness one feels here. It's a genuine happiness, based on love and simplicity." "Is it very different from the mansions you used to live in?" "Completely different. In the mansions there was luxury but little real happiness. Here there is little luxury but a lot of real happiness." Mrs. Martha smiled. "Mr. Edward, we may not have much money, but we have a lot of love, and that is worth more than any material wealth." Claire reflected on her father's words. "Dad, do you think if we hadn't gone through all those difficulties, we would have learned these lessons?" "Probably not, my dear. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what truly matters." "And what truly matters?" asked Sarah. "Family, friendship, the opportunity to do good for other people," Edward replied without hesitation. "And the soup," added Claire, making everyone laugh. "Especially the soup," agreed Edward. The following week, the story of Edward, Claire, and Sarah was featured on the region's main television program. The journalist in charge wanted to understand how a company had managed to transform itself so completely in such a short time. "Mr. Edward," asked the journalist during the interview, "what was the secret to this transformation?" There was no secret. There was only the decision to do the right thing, regardless of the cost. But did this transformation cost the company a great deal? It cost money, yes, but it brought us a return in satisfaction and prosperity that was worth every penny invested. And Miss Claire, what was it like taking over the company after so many years away? "Actually, I was never really away," replied Claire. "I spent 15 years observing and learning. When I could finally participate actively, I knew exactly what I wanted to change." "And, Miss Sarah, how did a cleaner become the social responsibility coordinator for a large company?" "I never stopped being a cleaner," replied Sarah. "It's just that now I clean up social problems instead of cleaning offices." Her answer drew laughter from the audience and the journalist. "Seriously, how was that transition?" "It was natural. I've always cared about people's well-being. Now I have the resources and structure to do it on a much larger scale." "Do you have any advice for other companies that want to follow the same path?" Edward answered. "Start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Choose one area to improve and focus on it until you achieve concrete results. And most importantly, added Claire, remember that happy employees are productive employees. It's not charity, it's business intelligence. And don't forget the soup, concluded Sarah, making everyone laugh again. After the interview, they received dozens of calls from business owners interested in learning about their methods. They also received hundreds of messages from people who had been inspired by the story. One message in particular caught Edward's attention. It was from a man who identified himself as Thomas, a former employee of the company during Julian's time. Mr. Edward, I worked at the company for 12 years, during Mr. Julian's administration. Those were the 12 hardest years of my professional life. I was fired when I refused to use substandard materials on a construction project. I spent 2 years unemployed and lost my home. But seeing what you've done with the company now, I've regained my faith in humanity. Thank you for proving it's possible to be successful while being honest. Edward was moved by the message. Claire, we need to find this man, he said. Why? Because he was a victim of Julian's practices. We need to right this wrong. How are we going to do that? We'll offer him his job back, with back pay for the 2 years he was unemployed. Dad, that's going to cost a fortune. Daughter, some things are more important than money. They got in touch with Thomas and arranged a meeting. The man, 52 years old, arrived at the office visibly nervous. Mr. Edward, thank you for seeing me, said Thomas. Thomas, I'm the one who should apologize for the injustices you suffered because of my company. But you weren't there at the time. It doesn't matter, it was my company, my responsibility. Edward explained the proposal for rehiring and financial restitution. Thomas began to cry. Mr. Edward, I can't believe this is happening. It's happening because it's the right thing to do. But I don't even know if I can still work well. I've been out of it for so long. Thomas, Sarah interrupted, you were fired because you refused to do something wrong. That proves you're exactly the type of employee we want. Are you sure, miss? Absolutely, replied Claire. We need people of integrity like you. Thomas was rehired as a quality supervisor, responsible for ensuring all materials and processes met the highest standards. It was a position created specifically to prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating. You know what moves me the most about all this? Edward said to Sarah a few weeks later. What? It's seeing how every act of justice generates other acts of justice. Thomas has already identified 3 suppliers who were trying to sell substandard materials. It's like you said, we change the world one person at a time, and every person we change changes other people too. Around that time, Edward began writing a book about his experience. He wanted to document not only his own journey, but also the lessons learned about leadership, family, and social responsibility. Why do you want to write a book, Dad? Asked Claire. Because I believe our story can inspire others to make better choices. And are you going to tell everything? Even the 15 years on the street? Especially the 15 years on the street. That's where I learned the most important lessons. Sarah offered to help with the writing, organizing the memories and testimonies Edward shared. Mr. Edward, there's a part of the story I still don't fully understand, she said during a writing session. Which part? Why did you never try to contact me after you left the hospital? You knew where to find me. Edward became thoughtful. Because I was ashamed, my dear. Ashamed of what? Ashamed of having lied about who I was. Ashamed of having involved you in my problems. Ashamed of not having the courage to face the truth about my daughter. But you never lied about who you really were. What do you mean? You were always kind, intelligent, dignified. That didn't change when I found out your name was Edward instead of Arthur. You're right. I let myself be defined by my mistakes instead of defining myself by my values. And that's why you spent 15 years punishing yourself. Exactly. Claire, who was listening to the conversation, added, Dad, I think we all punish ourselves sometimes for mistakes that aren't always truly our own. What do you mean? I punished myself for 15 years thinking you had abandoned me because I wasn't good enough. And I punished myself thinking I didn't deserve help, said Sarah. What do you mean? Asked Edward and Claire together. For years I thought it was selfish of me to want a better life when so many people were suffering. And now I understand that improving my own life puts me in a better position to help other people." Edward smiled. "It seems we've all learned the same lesson. We can't help others if we don't take care of ourselves first." "It's like on an airplane," said Claire. "You have to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others." "Good analogy, honey." Edward's book was almost ready when they received unexpected news. Julian had requested a prison visit. "He wants to talk to me," said Edward. "Will you accept?" asked Claire. "I don't know. Part of me wants to understand why he did all that. Another part prefers to leave the past in the past." "And what does your heart say?" asked Sarah. "My heart says it might be important for my own healing process." "Then go. But don't go alone." "Do you want to come with me?" "We want to be available if you need us," replied Claire. On the scheduled day, Edward went to the prison accompanied by Claire and Sarah, who waited in the reception area while he talked with Julian. The conversation lasted 2 hours. When Edward left the room, he was visibly shaken. "How was it?" asked Claire. "Difficult but necessary." "Did he apologize?" "Not exactly. But he acknowledged he made wrong choices." "And how do you feel?" "At peace. I finally understand that I couldn't have saved Julian from himself." On the way back, Edward shared details of the conversation. "Julian said he was always jealous of me," he reported. "Jealous of what?" asked Sarah. "Of the ease I had connecting with people. He said he always felt socially inadequate." "Does that justify what he did?" "It doesn't justify it, but it explains it. Julian turned his insecurity into arrogance and his jealousy into cruelty. And now? Now he'll have plenty of time to reflect on his choices." "Have you forgiven him?" asked Claire. Edward reflected for a long moment. "I'm in the process of forgiving, not for his sake, but for my own." "How so?" "Holding a grudge only hurts me. Forgiving is a way to free myself from the past." "That doesn't mean you approve of what he did." "Exactly. Forgiving is not approving. It's deciding not to carry the weight of anger anymore." This conversation became an important chapter in Edward's book. He wrote about the difference between forgiveness and approval, and about how forgiveness is, in fact, an act of self-care. The book was launched 6 months later and became a bestseller. Edward decided to donate all the profits to social assistance programs. "Why don't you want to keep the book's money?" asked a journalist during the launch. "Because this story doesn't belong only to me," replied Edward. "It belongs to all the people who were harmed by the mistakes of the past, and to all the people who are benefited by the changes of the present." "And what is the main message you want to convey?" "That it's never too late to start over, that small acts of kindness can change the world, and that true wealth lies in the relationships we build." During the book signing, an elderly woman approached Edward with the book in her hand. "Mr. Edward, thank you for writing this book," she said. "Why?" "My son has been in prison for 5 years. After reading your story, I decided to forgive him and restart our relationship. That makes me very happy. And I learned something important. My son made mistakes, but that doesn't mean he is a bad person." "Exactly. We are all more than our worst moments." Stories like this reached Edward constantly. His book was inspiring people to reconsider broken relationships, to make more ethical choices in their work, and to practice more acts of kindness in their daily lives. 1 year after the book's launch, Edward received a special invitation. A university wanted him to give a lecture on ethical leadership for business administration students. "Dad, are you going to accept?" asked Claire. "I think so. It could be a good opportunity to plant seeds in future business leaders." "And can we come with you?" "Of course, this is a story that belongs to all of us." In the lecture, Edward told the whole story, from the initial partnership with Julian to the present moment. The students were fascinated, especially with the part about the 15 years on the street. "Professor Edward," asked a student during the Q&A period, "do you think it was necessary to go through so much suffering to learn these lessons?" "I don't know if it was necessary, but it was the path life presented to me, and I learned that we can choose what we do with our suffering. We can let it make us bitter, or we can use it to make us stronger." And how do we know which choice to make? By asking ourselves, will this choice help me become a better person? Will it help me contribute positively to the world? And if the answer is yes, then it's the right choice, even if it's difficult. Another student asked, how did you manage to forgive someone who hurt you so much? Sarah answered, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or approving. It means deciding not to let anger control our life. And how do we do that in practice? By focusing on the present and the future instead of constantly reliving the past, replied Claire. A third student asked, what is the most important advice you would give to future business leaders? Edward reflected for a moment. Always remember that behind every employee, client, supplier, there is a person with dreams, fears, a family. Your decisions affect real lives. And how do you balance that with the need for profit? By discovering that doing the right thing is often also the most profitable in the long run, answered Claire. And if it isn't, then you'll have to decide what kind of person you want to be, concluded Sarah. After the lecture, several students approached to talk individually. Edward was impressed by their maturity and their questions. You know what impresses me most about these young people, he said to Claire and Sarah during dinner. What? It's that they're already thinking about business ethics even before they graduate. In our time, these issues only came up after many mistakes. Does that mean the next generations will be better? Asked Sarah. I think so. At least they will be more aware of the consequences of their choices. And can our story contribute to that awareness? I hope so, daughter. I hope our experience helps other people not to make the same mistakes we made. 2 years had passed since Edward's rescue. The company continued to grow and become a benchmark in social responsibility. The Hearty Soup initiative had expanded to other cities, always maintaining the philosophy that small acts of kindness can transform lives. Sarah had been invited to coordinate social programs at other companies, but she preferred to continue working with Edward and Claire. Why don't you accept these opportunities? Edward asked in a conversation. Because here isn't just my job, it's my family, she replied. But you could earn more money at other companies. Mr. Edward, you taught me that true wealth isn't measured in money. Edward smiled. And what do you consider your true wealth? The opportunity to make a difference in people's lives, the family I found in all of you, the satisfaction of knowing my work has purpose. You've changed a lot in these 2 years, Sarah. Changed for the better. You've changed to become more confident, more sure of your own worth, but you kept the kindness and humility that were always your main traits. It was by being around all of you that I learned to value myself. Claire, who was listening to the conversation, added, Sarah, you taught us as much as we taught you. How so? You taught us about simplicity, about the importance of small gestures, about how kindness can be more powerful than any business strategy. And most importantly, said Edward, you taught us that heroism isn't in grand deeds, but in persisting in doing good even when no one is watching. I'm no hero, protested Sarah. Of course you are. For 3 months you woke up early every day to bring food to a stranger, without expecting anything in return. I did it because it made me feel good. Exactly. And that is the definition of true kindness, doing good because it's natural, not because it's obligatory. That night they received an unexpected call. It was from a 25-year-old man named Nathan, who introduced himself as Julian's son. Mr. Edward, I know we have no right to bother you, but I need to speak with you. About what? About my father, and about the things he did. Edward looked at Claire and Sarah, who nodded, encouraging him to accept the conversation. Where would you like to meet, Nathan? May I come to your company tomorrow? Of course, we'll be expecting you. Nathan arrived the next day, accompanied by a woman the same age, who introduced herself as his wife, Megan. Mr. Edward, thank you for seeing us, said Nathan. Don't mention it. How can I help you? Actually, we are the ones who want to help you. How so? Nathan opened a briefcase and took out several documents. My father hid money in bank accounts overseas, money that was stolen from your company. Edward was surprised. And why are you telling me this? Because we want to do the right thing, replied Megan. We don't want to live with dirty money. Do you know this money could secure your future? Mr. Edward, said Nathan. "I work as a teacher and Megan is a nurse. We earn little, but we earn it honestly. We prefer it that way." Claire approached. "Nathan, do you know what your father did to the company?" "I know everything, and I am deeply ashamed." "Don't be ashamed. You are not responsible for his actions." "But I can be responsible for my own actions. And my action is to return this money to its rightful owner." Edward was moved by the young couple's attitude. "Nathan, Megan, do you know this will result in a very significant sum for the company?" "We know, and we also know that you will use this money to help people in need." "How do you know that?" "Because we followed your work. We read your book. We see the reports about the social programs." Megan added, "You are the example of how we want to live our lives." "And how do you want to live?" "Making a difference in the world, each in our own field," replied Nathan. "Nathan is a teacher for underprivileged children," explained Megan, "and I work in public hospitals." "You are already making a difference," said Sarah. "But we want to do more. That's why we decided to return this money." Edward stood up and extended his hand to Nathan. "Nathan, you have the honor your father lost along the way. I hope I can keep that honor for the rest of my life. I'm sure you will. The recovered money was used to expand the company's social programs even further. Nathan and Megan were hired as consultants to develop educational and community health projects. "It's interesting how the story comes full circle," Edward remarked a few months later. "How so?" asked Claire. "Julian tried to destroy our family and our firm, but his son is helping us build something even better." "Do you think Julian knows about this?" "I don't know, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that Nathan chose a different path from his father." Sarah reflected on the comment. "That makes me think we always have a choice, no matter our origin or circumstances." "Exactly. Nathan could have chosen to keep the stolen money and live in luxury, but he chose integrity." "And we could have chosen to take revenge on Julian," said Claire, "but we chose forgiveness and building something positive. Every choice we make defines us more than our circumstances," concluded Edward. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought from wherever you're watching and leave your honest opinion in the comments. Do you believe small acts of kindness can truly transform the world? We would love to read your reflections. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.